Hello, I haven't really done this in a while, and I thought I would want to kind of start easy into this whole thing. So I recently watched this movie called Eighth Grade, which I'm sure everyone has heard of it to some degree. Many people have heard of it, although it may not be like a popular movie per se. But I saw it recently. I'm quite late to the party, and I thought it was very fascinating because of how well, for those who are unfamiliar, eighth grade is about a girl who is in eighth grade in the 2010s, and it really encapsulates the era of it, and it's very fascinating because of well, I'll get into it more later, but there's this idea in which technology is just so quickly and rapidly developing and changing every few years that again watching this movie and maybe 2 years from now you watch this movie again, it will feel to some degree quite antiquated because perhaps of the specific references to certain things in social media, specific trends, the fact that this film opens and ends with a YouTube recording of a YouTube video, and that YouTube is it really is a big part of the lives of many younger people and even just more people in general. Like this idea that this is a new platform that has really superseded the media landscape in terms of what one would choose to do in any given point is to kind of go on their phone or whatever and watch some videos online, and that really is a big part of how this generation or this new crop of human beings coming into this world have to deal with, unfortunately or fortunately. There are many things that go in and out of that, but there's what struck me most about, I mean, this movie's fine, it's funny, it's sweet and all that, but what struck me most about the movie, um, I made me really think because there's a scene in the movie where I forgot her name, but the actress Elsie Fisher, she was about to hang out with this new friend she made who was an older high school student, and they go to this mall of sorts, and they are having some kind of they have dinner or something, and this older boy makes a suggestion, or makes not a suggestion, but he makes a uh, he kind of asks questions to this young eighth grader girl, in which he seems to delineate that there seems to be a generational difference between her friends and the young girl, and it's a 4 year age difference, but for some reason it feels generational because a lot of the things that they felt they grew up on, and whether it is ideals or whatever, a lot of the things they grew up on she did not grow up on, and things that she grew up on did not exist when they were kind of coming of age. And the example used is like, when did you get Snapchat? And she says fifth grade, and for them they think that, well, that's kind of crazy that you were in fifth grade when Snapchat came out, because it definitely would have changed how you perceive the world. Or they say something about how you probably were sending dick pics in fifth grade to each other. Because I guess Snapchat is used in a very sexual manner for some teenagers. So it seems that the fact that it was popular must have influenced how she and others people her age develop and think about the world in a way that even distinguishes them generationally, even though it's just 4 years. When in its industry, you think about like stuff like the baby boomers and Gen X, and these how people mentally distinguish generations were in these like 20, 30 year block periods of time when you would have been born, uh, and now on a practical level, on a relational level, it seems that there are generational differences between someone who is, say, my age and someone who is 4 years younger than me and 4 years younger than them, because of how it seems to that a lot of how we interact with the world is rapidly changing and developing. And I think it's interesting because I'm not sure how it would play for someone who's older, right? For someone who's older than me, for example, who didn't really have to kind of go through the specificities of the social media revolution of sorts. It does feel for me, for example, that when I imagine my growing up, and the degree to which I had social media, I do think that once social media became such a popular thing, it did influence our lives in such a big way that it must it does feel like there must be some kind of disconnect, but it's hard to tell how that will kind of manifest in the future, whether or not that it actually changes anything in particular. The fact that growing up with the internet, for example, I think probably uh, gives me a different experience. Obviously it gives me a different experience, but I grew up with a very strong inclination towards trying to read things online, and I love doing Wikipedia, and being able to read about movies or see movies or all these things that would have been impossible before, and the thing with social media, with specifically with younger people, is that as it's kind of an obvious thing. I don't even feel like it's very interesting for me to talk about it. But again, it's this idea where you kind of have to create this online identity of sorts that seems to be just as important, perhaps, as your social real life. I don't want to say real life, but like your physical identity, and it's you have to kind of manipulate how you're perceived in those different kind of stratons of it's a whole thing that it's a whole issue that some people feel like they need to deal with, and it's a very common right now, obviously, but it definitely does seem like something that would be stressful if one had to kind of go into that from a very young age. Because again, when I think about my growing up, when I was around eighth grade or whatever, the degree to which I had social media was we had messaging apps, which is I was on Yahoo Messenger, and that was the extent of it. And there was no real sense of identity to that degree, where except for the fact that you would have the ability to choose a profile picture and maybe write a little bit like a status message. I think, which is interesting because it doesn't really come up in the future social media's platforms, but where you have like a persistent set of words or things that that would always be seen whenever one actually tries to contact you, like a phrase, or some people just put like links to music or whatever it was. But that was the extent of it. We didn't have to think about the mythification of the daily life through Snapchat stories or Instagram stories, or the idea that one has to constantly amass a following, or at least not necessarily that one has to amass a following, but that one's so-called following has some kind of pertinence to their social status in their even in the school setting. Because I definitely have seen this manifest in some places I've volunteered at, for example, in different schools, or even just in my own school, and seeing when I was about to leave high school. It was just a very big thing. It is a very big thing that is being a part of the lives of those who are growing up, and I'm very curious to see how it kind of well, if it even does influence how one thinks about the world and processes things, and the amount of maybe perhaps personal stress, and how the creation of the separate identity, the online identity, how that kind of evolves and manifests as one gets older as well, and comes out of, say, the phase of adolescence, which is a long period. But again, it's so eighth grade. I mean, I guess I didn't really talk about the movie that much. I liked it. It's fine, but I was very fascinated about that idea, right? Of the idea of the shortening of the supposedly. Like, you can argue about what a generational gap even means, and maybe you can say, well, it doesn't even matter. It's not a real generational gap, but the fact that in practice it is felt is something worth probably considering. And I'm wondering how that kind of progresses into the future. So that's what I thought about some of the things that went on in that movie. I know there are many things I can talk about over the next however long I'm going to be doing these, but I was gone because I was backpacking in Japan for 2.5 months. I was backpacking, and it made it difficult to kind of, and I didn't really want to make videos. I just wanted to kind of experience things in the moment in that kind of period. And it was a lot of things can go on. I can talk about some of those stuff next time, but yeah, this is what I think. Watch the movie, and especially I think it's very useful to watch the movie if you are someone who doesn't understand the younger generation, because the movie does kind of get a lot of, or it seems to accurately depict a lot of the issues that seem to be persistent in, say, people who are my age, people who are a few years younger than me. It is quite accurate, I think. So that's interesting to look at if you are not if you don't quite understand what it's like, or you want to kind of know a little peek into the Gen Z life. Then you can check out the movie. I think it'll be worth your time. So yeah.